Hey guys, live here with Flight Club with one of my close friends and instructor, Keven Li.
Hello.
So Keven and I actually met about 3 years ago, and Keven actually started training me here in Toronto. So prior to meeting Keven, I was flying at a grass strips in Woodstock with no tower, not talking to anyone, just flying without a radio and doing whatever I wanted. So Keven had the joy of meeting me and teaching me how to fly again while doing my night rating. So one of our funniest stories actually is our first flight, where I'm used to flying at a grass strips. So I would line up on the runway and take off, turn at 500 feet, and continue with my circuit just on a 500-foot circuit basis. Yes. So our first takeoff, I lined up on the right half of the runway because at Toronto Island the runway is massive, and I'm used to maybe a 50-foot runway maximum, and this was 150 feet wide. So I lined up on the right-hand side, and Kevin's like, what are you doing? Line up in the middle. And it's like, I thought this was the middle. And that's how our flight started, and that's how our friendship started, just on the right foot, I hope. But we've roped Keven into sharing his knowledge here. He's taught many students, and he has 1,000 hours in flying.
Little over.
So Keven, as we had posted earlier, you're a Class 3 instructor.
That's correct.
So can you tell me a little bit about the different classes? What does it mean?
Yeah, so it's pretty much kind of like a ranking system based on just how much experience you have. When you first get your instructor rating, you get a Class 4, and eventually as you gain more experience and pass more tests, you move up to Class 1. And Class 4 is the lowest, and it basically means you need to be supervised because you don't really know what you're doing, you don't have any real world experience. So a more experienced supervising instructor, usually a Class 1 or 2, is going to watch over you. Once you pass enough students and they deem you experienced, you get upgraded to Class 3, at which point you can kind of do your own thing. And from then, some people choose to pursue Class 1 or 2, which needs more tests and studying. Some people are just happy being Class 3, but essentially once you're Class 3, you're considered to be competent and not require supervision.
Sounds good. They made a mistake with you here on the Class 3,
yes,
but
they did.
We'll continue on. So let's say I'm a brand new pilot, or I'm a brand new person, and I want to start flying. I know nothing about airplanes. I just love flying. They look really cool. I've gone to air shows. It looks awesome. What do I do? Where do I even start?
Yeah. So the internet's a great resource. I'm a big fan of doing your own research and just kind of going as far as you can on your own before you get too dependent on anyone else. Personally, that's how I started. I spent a lot of time on internet forums or just Googling, and then I made a couple of calls to my local flight schools just to inquire about introductory flights, because you do have to fly at some point. So to get started, I would say just do a lot of your own research, and once you're happy with where you want to go or how, or have some sort of a goal in mind, that's when you would start reaching out to flight schools and booking some introductory flights.
Cool. So Keven, many of you people don't know Keven, but Keven and myself are both extremely cheap people. And flying is not a cheap hobby or career to get into. But Keven is one of the most brilliant pilots that I've ever met, and he found a way. It's not necessarily a special way, but he found a way to make flying as cheap as possible. So Keven, how did you went from not knowing how to fly to flying, getting your commercial pilot license, and instructing in a very short period of time? What was your process, and how did you do it so cheaply? And if you don't mind sharing, what did you spend?
Yeah, of course. So back to what I said earlier, aviation is kind of different from other career paths in that the more you do your own work and do your own research, the more return you're going to get, both in terms of cost savings and kind of time savings as well, right? So a lot of students I have, they're there, they're like, okay, here's money, just train me. I'm not going to do any of my own work. I'm not going to do any of my research. Like, I want you to hold my hand every step of the way. And that's fine, but you have to recognize if you're going to do that, it's going to take a lot more time and especially a lot more money on your part. So if you want to save on both, what I would recommend, starting from day one, you would have to do a big part of your training online in terms of the ground school. I'm not going to recommend any specific programs here, but you will be able to find them very easily with a quick Google search. So do your ground school online, because then you're not dependent on the flight school's progress, and you're not dependent on someone else saying like whether or not you can move along. So that's a really big one. It's also cheaper. 2, at the start, when you're just getting your initial license, you're a little handicapped in the sense that you don't have too much freedom. So you pretty much just have to go to a flight school. Like, there's not really any way around it. But even then, there is some control you have in the sense that the more you study on your own and the more you come prepared to lessons, that's very, very important. You're going to end up repeating stuff less and just moving on to new material quicker. So if you kind of like always come unprepared, never really do your own review, then the instructor has to spend time going over stuff with you and ultimately bill you more money. So initially, doing your own work and really taking control of your own training is a way to save a lot, essentially.
So when you're first starting off flying, I know for myself, I had used Harv's Air to do my ground school online, and I found that was very, very thorough, and they have a lot of good videos on there. Just so you guys know, we don't have any sort of affiliation with Harv's Air. It's just a really good platform that I've used, and being a tech company, we love tech. So I would highly recommend Harv's Air. They're authorized by Nav Canada to train online for your private pilot license and commercial pilot license, all the way through to multi-IFR. They have all the training and all the learnings that you need on there. Have you used Harv's Air, or what have you used previously?
Yeah, Harv's Air was my main method. I've done literally all of my textbook studying out of Harv's Air.
Cool.
So anything that wasn't in a plane, I've done it on Harv's Air, and personally, it worked out very good for me, both in terms of time and money savings. That being said, there are many other options. I encourage you to go out, do your own research, and find what works best for you.
Cool. So walk us through your journey from brand new pilot, walking to the airport, being like, I want to fly, teach me how. You started off there. Did you go straight to Island Air, or did you go to Buttonville?
So I currently instruct out of Island Air at Toronto Island, and I did a lot of my training there, but that's not actually where I started. I started flying out of Oshawa with Canadian Flight Academy about four and a half years ago, something like that. And yeah, in terms of flight schools, I think it's very important for you to do your own research and be thorough and just have a good idea of what you're walking into, right? You're going to be spending a lot of time and a lot of money, so you have to really know what you want and really know how you're going to get it. And that's one of the things I could have done better starting out, because I didn't spend as much time as I should, and if I did, I would have known that Island Air was closer. It would have gotten me through my training more efficiently, and ultimately, about 20 hours into my training, I switched from Oshawa to Toronto Island.
Interesting. So you got your private pilot license how quickly?
So I was in high school at the time, and between high school, self-studying, and flying, it took me about 8 or 9 months. I flew a lot during the summer, and then it slowed down during the winter, and you kind of move things along.
So for your private pilot license, how many hours do you need to get certified?
So that's a very good question, and legally, it's 45 hours. So if you look at any flight school, or if you look at the Transport Canada website, it'll say 45 hours legally. Now, it's very important to set your expectations realistically. anything in flying, if you expect a certain time, I would go as far as to say the reality is going to be double. Like if you think it's going to take 45 hours, it's probably going to take 90 hours. In fact, that is about the average of what I see in most of my students. If you think it's going to take 6 months, it's probably going to take a year. Aviation is just very full of delays and just things happening not as quick as they should, and that's one of the most important lessons you can learn. And in fact, it'd be very great to take that into your first lesson, like knowing that it's not going to go as planned.
So you would say budget for maybe like 70 to 80 hours if you're planning on doing your private pilot license, but the best way to like cut that down is to fly consistently. Like for me, I got my power pilot license through the Air Cadet program. And with the Air Cadet program, you basically live, breathe flying for 7 weeks. And they consolidate everything, your ground school, your flying, everything is into 7 weeks. And I got my license with about 55 hours,
Yep.
which is insane. But every single day I would wake up, go to ground school, go flying, and that's all I did for those 7 weeks.
Yeah, so the Air Cadet program is very unique in that you literally do nothing else for a summer. Like, that will absolutely not be your case if you're doing like work or school or have a family or whatever on the side. So it will definitely take more hours and will definitely take more months to complete.
So let's say I got my private pilot license now. So what do I do next? Like I want to go fly a Boeing, or like I want to fly the big planes. How do I get there?
Right, so, well, the first thing is you need more hours. You need more hours, and remember back earlier when I said that you were kind of handicapped and tied to a flight school for your private license. Guess what? After your private license, you're not tied anymore. You can do whatever you want. You're a licensed pilot. So now you have to think about where to get more hours. A commercial pilot's license requires 200 hours, and a lot of people, like, first of all, I really recommend going to a flight school for your initial private license. However, after you complete that, I don't recommend building the majority of your time, because the gap between private license and commercial, there's a gap of just time building, which is essentially just flying around, doing whatever you want, going wherever you want. And you'll find that in between block, a flight school is not optimal because they will charge you more money, one, and two, you're very bound by the scheduling system. So if someone has a flight before you and someone has a flight after you and you have a 2-hour window, like, yeah, you can just go like fly around in a circle and come back, but is that really what you want to do for 100+ hours in between your private and commercial? Like,
and that's where Flight Club comes in, right? Like we built this platform so that pilots, when they're time building or when they just want to go fly somewhere, they have access to different airplanes and not a tight schedule. Because like I'm a pilot, I want to go run a plane, the plane's not being used. Well, perfect, I'll take it for the day and go up to Manitoulin Islands and hang out there.
exactly.
As opposed to a flight school where you have, like, if you're taking the plane for the day, you need to fly it for 5 hours or whatever their criteria is. But while you're time building, like, is there any way to speed up the process? Like, I feel like from a private pilot license to a commercial license, it's such a big jump. Should I be working on like other ratings during that time? Will that time count towards my commercial license?
Yeah, absolutely. So anytime counts towards your commercial license. If you do your night rating, your multi-engine rating, your IFR rating, all of that will count towards the experience requirement for a commercial. So in fact, what I recommend to save the most money is go in the order of private, night rating, multi-IFR, and then finish off with your commercial. That will actually save you the most money overall. A lot of people want to get commercial as soon and as cheaply as possible, so they'll just go private, night rating, commercial, and get paid. But what they don't realize is that if you want to work for the airlines, you're going to need a multi and multi-IFR eventually, and it'll cost you less in the long run if you wrap that up into your initial block of training.
Got it. Yeah, because for your commercial license, you need a certain amount of hours with an instructor.
Right.
So when you're doing that, you may as well like get that instructor to teach you all these other skills.
Correct. So for the commercial license, you need 35 hours of dual instruction. So that's instruction with an instructor after your private license. So any time you spend doing the multi or the multi-IFR or the night rating actually counts towards that requirement. So you can see how you can kind of double dip with your hours and do two things with the same amount of time.
Got it. Cool. Now, getting hired, how hard is it to find a flying job? Or like, once you get your commercial license, what type of jobs are available? Like, how long is it before I go and fly a big airline?
Well, that's if you're talking about an airline job initially, that's going to fluctuate a lot because your first job after a commercial license, it's not going to be at an airline. If you have that as an expectation, get that out of your head right now, because it's just not realistic. There's a lot of factors depending on what your first job is, what the economy's like, whether or not you're in a pandemic. That's going to affect when you get your first airline job. But your first flying job, there are quite a few routes to go. The quickest way to get a flying job after commercial is just to instruct. That is the simplest and quickest way to get a flying job, which is personally what I did, so I can talk about that. But there are other ways. Most of them involve leaving populated cities. So if you're somewhere like Toronto, you're not going to be getting a non-instructional job as your first job, unless you know someone. So most likely you will have to move out to a place where no one else wants to go, which has more of a demand for jobs.
And I have seen like lower time jobs, and what I mean by lower time is maybe like 250 hours, where you're like flying a route and looking at pipelines, or where you're, I don't know, like any sort of
right. Survey work, of course, but usually those jobs require you to move out of major metropolitan areas. Generally speaking, you will find exceptions, but generally speaking, they ask you to leave cities.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know, guys. Do you guys have any questions? I know we had gotten one question from our question box, and the question was, how often do you need to fly to maintain your currency? And I know this is a big issue for people because like I'm working full time, I'm trying to get my license, I've got a family, I've got a whole bunch of things going on. Like what's the minimum that you recommend I should fly so that I'm like not losing skills? So like I learned something. How quickly should I continue flying?
Right. So that's a very good question, and I'm going to assume that question applies to when you're training initially.
Yeah.
Of course, the more skill you get, the more it becomes retained. But initially, and you probably won't like this answer, but you're going to want to fly as much as possible. Like literally as much as possible, because the unfortunate reality is, based on my experience, people who have jobs, who have other commitments, move very slowly and progress very slowly, if at all, just because of the deterioration of your skills.
So like when you say as much as possible, what are we talking here? Like should it be like twice a week, 3 times a week? Like how often should I like try and schedule to plan, like I am going to do it Monday, Wednesday, Friday? Like how often should I do it?
How often? So usually people get into flying and they're like, okay, I'll fly, I'll schedule twice a week on the weekends and that should be good enough, right? Unfortunately, that's not good enough, because remember earlier we talked about how things are going to get delayed in flying, and one of the biggest causes of delays is weather. So let's say you schedule 2 bookings a week. It rains one day, it rains the other day, that's a week you didn't fly, right? And you think, oh, that's not going to be that bad, but in the winter, if you schedule twice a week, you can easily go 1 month, 2 months without flying, and all of a sudden you've forgotten everything. So to me, 2 times a week, if you schedule twice a week, you're not going to make progress. I have seen people make progress like that, but they are the exception, not the rule. I would recommend at least 3 or 4 bookings a week if you're otherwise committed, and 3 or 4 bookings a week will allow you to fly about half of that. So you might expect 1 or 2 flights a week, just on average.
Awesome. Now, one other question that I had is like there are a lot of programs out there where you like sign up with a college and you get a license and a degree like through the college. I know you kind of did it differently, where you're doing university separately and you're doing your flight training separately. Like, why did you go that route instead of going to a college where it's like you fly and you learn and it's all in one integrated program?
Right. So cost was a very big factor for me. Of course, there are other considerations than money, but for me, money was a very big one. And at the end of the day, going to a college will cost you at least twice, at least double what you would pay otherwise going to a local flight school. If cost is not a high priority for you, that is great. Just for me personally, I feel like doubling the cost would not provide me with double the return. Yes, it's true that the quality of trading is higher. Yes, it's true that you're going to get presented with more opportunities. But the downside is when you go to a college, you're locked into a 4-year program. So no matter how hard you work, no matter how efficient you are with your studies, you're getting done in 4 years. However, if you train on your own time, 1, you can save money, and 2, you can save time in an industry where seniority is paramount, right? So if you do your training on your own, you can kind of optimize your own way and get it done in a year or 2 years, and all of a sudden you're commercially licensed, and someone else who went to a college at the same time still has 2 more years before they start working. So that is a huge, huge factor in a seniority-driven industries like aviation.
Got it. It looks like one of our pilots from Flight Club, he consistently flies out of Buttonville. He wants to join us. I wonder if he has a question or if he just wants to join in here. Let's let him in. We're just waiting for him to connect here. Grab some water. Just while it connects here, you decided to go the route of like flying independently, and your journey was a lot faster. Like in 4 years, you went from being a pilot without any knowledge to being a pilot where you're instructing others, and you have over 1,000 hours now.
Yeah. So conversely, if 4 years ago I had entered a college program, I would just be graduating right now with 200 hours and a commercial license, right? I would have a degree on top of that, and that certainly has value. It's just in this industry, hours are the most valuable. Hours will always be more important than anything else that you have.
Got it. So when you're applying to a flying job, like I was shocked when you said this. Like you for your first flying job where you became an instructor, you're like, I didn't even have like a resume. I just like they knew you and they're like, hey, do you want to be an instructor? Or do you want to teach with us? Like what was that process like getting hired?
Yeah, so it was. That's why earlier I said getting hired as an instructor is going to be the most straightforward, because in this industry, a lot of it is what connections you have and who you know. And guess what? The flight school that you do the most of your training at is going to know you. And as long as you have a good reputation there, eventually when you get qualified as an instructor, most of the time they're going to take you on without any real question, simply because instructors are always in demand.
Awesome. Well, guys, I don't think Claudio's joining in anymore, but feel free to hit us up if you have any questions. Kevin, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Yeah. We really appreciate it. Just as a token of our thanks, we want to present you with a Flight Club T-shirt, so you can wear it when you're flying or when you're instructing, and just take some pictures and represent. For all the people watching, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be in touch next Sunday when we're continuing the Let's Go Flying series, and we're going to have another awesome guest lined up. So stay tuned. We'll put it on our Instagram and talk to you soon. Hope to see you flying.